Most people are not living their own lives. They are managing reactions. From the moment we begin to understand the world, we are taught, quietly, subtly, to look outward for confirmation. A nod from a teacher, a smile from a parent, acceptance from a group. None of this is wrong at first. It helps us learn boundaries. But the problem begins when this outward checking never stops. When, as adults, we still pause before every decision and ask, will they approve? That question seems harmless, yet it slowly erodes something essential inside you. Each time you ask it, you hand over a small piece of your inner authority. Inner authority is your ability to stand behind your own decisions without needing permission. It is the calm sense of, I know why I am doing this, even if no one else understands. Approval seeking weakens this because it trains you to doubt your own judgment. You stop listening to your inner signal and start listening for applause. Over time, you may become very skilled at reading people, but very disconnected from yourself. Notice how this plays out in daily life. You adjust your words so no one is uncomfortable. You delay action until someone agrees. You abandon ideas not because they are wrong, but because they might be criticized. This is not humility. It is hesitation dressed as politeness. And hesitation repeated often enough becomes a habit. That habit slowly convinces you that your own perspective is not enough. The danger is not rejection itself. Rejection is part of life. The danger is letting the fear of rejection decide your behavior. When that happens, your actions are no longer guided by principle, but by reaction. You move not because something is right, but because it is safe. And safety, when it becomes your highest value, makes your world very small. When you rely on approval, confidence becomes unstable. One compliment lifts you, one comment destroys you. This creates emotional dependence, and dependence weakens posture, not just physically, but mentally. You begin to stand in a way that asks for permission rather than taking responsibility. Education of the self begins when you recognize this pattern and decide to interrupt it. Interrupting it does not mean becoming rude or dismissive. It means learning to tolerate the discomfort of not being liked. This is a form of mental training. The mind reacts strongly to disapproval because it associates it with danger. But most disapproval today carries no real threat. It is simply an opinion. When you stay present with that discomfort and do not immediately correct yourself, something important happens. Your inner authority strengthens. Each time you act in alignment with your values without checking for approval, you reinforce trust in yourself. That trust is quiet, but it is powerful. It does not need constant reassurance. It allows you to move with steadiness rather than urgency. People may not always agree with you, but they will feel your stability. Over time, you realize something liberating. Approval given too easily has little value. What truly matters is whether you can stand alone with your decisions when no one is clapping. When you stop outsourcing your self-worth, you reclaim your center. From that center, your actions become deliberate, your words become measured, and your presence becomes grounded. Stand firm enough that approval becomes optional, not necessary. The habit of people-pleasing does not begin as a flaw in your character. It begins as a strategy. At some point in life, often very early, you learned that adjusting yourself brought relief. When you behaved in a certain way, tension reduced. When you agreed, conflict disappeared. When you stayed quiet, things felt safer. The mind remembers this. It stores the pattern and repeats it, not because it is wise, but because it once worked. This is important to understand. People-pleasing is learned, not natural. You were not born needing to impress. A child expresses hunger, frustration, curiosity without apology. The need to manage reactions comes later, shaped by environment, authority, and experience. Seeing this clearly removes shame. If something is learned, it can be retrained. But first, it must be observed without judgment. As this habit develops, it begins to disguise itself as good behavior. You are told you are easy to work with, polite, considerate. These labels feel positive, so the habit strengthens, yet underneath, something else is happening. Each time you suppress a real response to maintain harmony, the mind learns that honesty is risky. Each time you prioritize acceptance over truth, you teach yourself that connection requires self-denial. Over time, this creates confusion. You may feel tired without knowing why. You may feel invisible even when surrounded by people. This is the cost of constant adjustment. The energy required to maintain an image is far greater than the energy required to be authentic. Education of the self is recognizing that exhaustion is often not from doing too much, but from being too divided inside. People-pleasing also distorts your sense of responsibility. You begin to feel responsible for how others feel, think, and react. This is an impossible task. You cannot control another person's inner world. Trying to do so only pulls you away from your own. Slowly, your decisions are no longer based on what is necessary or right, but on what will cause the least disturbance. This leads to a life lived in avoidance. Breaking this pattern requires patience. The habit formed over years will not disappear through force. It changes through awareness and small acts of honesty. The first step is noticing the impulse to please without immediately obeying it. Pause. Feel the discomfort. Let the body experience the tension of not adjusting. This is training. Just as muscles grow through resistance, inner strength grows through tolerated discomfort. When you begin to respond instead of react, something shifts. You may speak less, but with more clarity. You may say no more often, without explanation. At first this feels unnatural because it goes against the old pattern. But unnatural does not mean wrong. It means unfamiliar. With repetition, unfamiliar becomes stable. As you unlearn people-pleasing, relationships change. Some become quieter. Some fall away. Others deepen, because they are now based on truth rather than performance. This is not loss, it is refinement. You are not rejecting others. You are returning to yourself. Remember, the goal is not to stop caring. The goal is to stop disappearing. When care is offered from a place of self-respect, it has weight. When agreement is given freely, it has meaning. And when silence is chosen consciously, it carries strength. What you unlearn today creates the freedom you will stand in tomorrow. Many people believe self-respect comes from being recognized, appreciated, or treated well by others. When that happens, it feels reinforcing, so the belief deepens. But this creates a fragile foundation. If self-respect depends on external response, then it disappears the moment that response changes. True self-respect is built differently. It is not granted, it is earned. And it is earned through discipline, especially when no one is watching. Discipline here does not mean harshness. It means consistency between what you know is right and what you choose to do. Each time you act in alignment with your values, even in small ways, you send a clear message to yourself: you can be trusted. That trust becomes the core of self-respect. Without it, confidence is only a performance, easily shaken by opinion. Consider how often people abandon standards for convenience. They delay what must be done, avoid difficult conversations, or compromise principles to maintain comfort. Each of these choices may seem minor, but the mind records them. Over time, it learns whether you stand by your word or negotiate with it. Self-respect grows when you stop negotiating with what you know is necessary. This is why discipline is essential. Discipline trains you to do what needs to be done regardless of mood or recognition. You wake up when you said you would. You speak honestly when silence would be easier. You remain steady when distraction is tempting. These actions are rarely praised, yet they quietly shape your inner posture. You begin to stand straighter, not because you feel superior, but because you feel aligned. Many seek validation because they lack this inner alignment. When your actions contradict your values, discomfort arises. Validation temporarily numbs that discomfort. A compliment distracts you from the feeling that something inside is unresolved. But discipline addresses the root. It resolves the inner conflict by bringing behavior back into order. There is also freedom in disciplined living. When you know you will act according to principle, decision-making becomes simpler. You do not need to calculate how each choice will be perceived. You ask a clearer question: does this align with my standards? This removes mental noise. The mind becomes less reactive, more focused. Discipline also teaches restraint. Not every thought needs expression. Not every opportunity needs pursuit. Learning when to hold back is as important as learning when to act. This restraint is often misunderstood as weakness, but it is a sign of strength. It shows you are not driven by impulse or approval, but by intention. As self-respect deepens, you become less dependent on external encouragement. Praise becomes pleasant, not necessary. Criticism becomes information, not identity. You listen, evaluate, and decide without collapse or inflation. This balance is the result of sustained inner work, not a sudden realization. It is important to be honest here. Building self-respect through discipline is uncomfortable. It requires facing parts of yourself that prefer ease over growth. But discomfort is the price of integrity. When you pay it consistently, the return is stability. In time, others will sense this. They may not understand it, but they will feel it. Your presence becomes calm, your words carry weight, and your boundaries become clear without force. This is not dominance. It is self-respect made visible through action. When discipline guides your behavior, validation loses its power. Many people believe confidence must be announced. They think it is something you show through constant explanation, strong opinions, or quick responses. But true confidence is often quiet. It does not rush to fill space. It does not feel the need to correct every misunderstanding. Silence, when chosen consciously, becomes a form of strength, and restraint becomes its discipline. Silence is not the absence of thought, it is the mastery of it. When you feel the urge to respond immediately, pause. That urge usually comes from insecurity, not clarity. It is the mind trying to protect an image, defend a position, or regain control. When you do not obey that impulse, you create space. In that space, you regain authority over your reactions. Restraint works in the same way. Not every emotion requires expression. Not every challenge requires confrontation. When you restrain yourself, you are not suppressing truth. You are choosing the right moment and the right measure. This choice demonstrates confidence because it shows you are not controlled by impulse or pressure. You act when action is necessary, not when emotion demands release. Observe how people respond under criticism. Some immediately explain, some become defensive, some attack back. These reactions are understandable, but they reveal dependence on perception. A confident mind listens first. It evaluates whether the criticism contains truth. If it does, it is accepted without drama. If it does not, it is released without resistance. No explanation is required. Silence also protects energy. Constant reaction drains attention and focus. Each time you argue with an opinion, you give it importance. Each time you justify yourself unnecessarily, you elevate another person's judgment above your own. Restraint prevents this leakage. It allows you to conserve strength for actions that matter. There is also dignity in silence. When you do not rush to prove yourself, others sense stability. They may not agree with you, but they will feel your composure. This composure cannot be faked. It comes from inner alignment and repeated practice of restraint. Over time, silence becomes natural, not forced. This does not mean withdrawing from communication. It means speaking with intention. Words are chosen, not scattered. When you do speak, your message carries more weight because it is not diluted by constant noise. People listen more carefully to those who do not speak out of habit. Restraint also applies to success. When something goes well, the urge to display it can be strong. But quiet confidence allows achievement to stand on its own. You do not need to announce your progress. Your consistency will reveal it. This protects you from arrogance and keeps focus on growth rather than image. Learning silence is uncomfortable at first. The mind feels exposed without explanation. It fears being misunderstood. But misunderstanding is not dangerous. Over time, you realize that clarity does not always require words. Presence itself communicates strength. When silence and restraint become part of your behavior, confidence stabilizes. It no longer rises with praise or collapses under judgment. You become harder to disturb, not because you are detached from life, but because you are rooted within it. Silence, practiced with awareness, turns pressure into poise. Detachment from opinions is often misunderstood. Many assume it means indifference, coldness, or withdrawal from people. In reality, detachment is a form of clarity. It allows you to engage with the world without being controlled by it. When you detach from opinions, you do not stop listening, you stop obeying. Opinions are everywhere. They come from family, society, culture, and even strangers. Some are thoughtful, others careless. Yet the mind tends to treat all opinions as equally important. This is where suffering begins. When every judgment is given weight, the mind becomes crowded and unstable. Detachment creates space. In that space, you regain choice. Mental freedom begins when you understand that opinions are temporary. They change with mood, context, and circumstance. What someone praises today, they may criticize tomorrow. Building your identity on something so unstable creates constant tension. Detachment allows you to see opinions as passing information rather than personal truth. This does not mean rejecting feedback. Feedback has value when it aligns with reality and growth. The difference is discernment. A detached mind evaluates before accepting. It asks, is this useful? Rather than, is this about me? This shift reduces emotional reactivity and increases intelligence. When you are attached to opinions, the mind anticipates judgment before it happens. You imagine reactions, rehearse explanations, and adjust behavior in advance. This consumes energy and distorts authenticity. Detachment interrupts this cycle. You act according to intention, then allow others to respond as they will. Their response becomes their responsibility. Detachment also strengthens emotional balance. Praise no longer inflates the ego, and criticism no longer wounds the identity. Both are experienced, but neither defines you. This balance is not suppression, it is regulation. You feel without being ruled by feeling. There is courage in this position. To detach from opinions means accepting that misunderstanding is inevitable. Not everyone will see your intentions clearly. Trying to control perception is endless and exhausting. When you release this effort, you reclaim focus. Mental freedom is not loud, it is calm and observant. You notice thoughts and reactions without immediate identification. You realize that an opinion is simply a sound or a sentence passing through awareness. You can choose to hold it or let it pass. This choice is freedom. As detachment deepens, relationships improve. Interactions become less defensive and more honest. You listen without preparing a response. You speak without needing approval. This creates genuine connection rather than performance. Ultimately, detachment from opinions returns authority to where it belongs, within. You become less reactive, more deliberate, and more present. Life becomes simpler because you are no longer negotiating with every voice. Freedom begins when opinions lose the power to decide your direction. Many people spend their lives trying to be liked, believing that acceptance is the highest achievement. Being liked feels safe. It reduces friction. It creates the illusion of harmony. But when being liked becomes the goal, principles quietly disappear. You begin to adjust values to fit expectations, and over time, you no longer know where you stand. Living by principles is not as comfortable as being liked, but it is far more stable. Principles are not opinions. They are the standards you return to when emotions fluctuate and circumstances change. They guide behavior when no one is watching and when approval is absent. A life built on principles has direction. A life built on likability has reaction. This difference determines whether you lead your life or negotiate it. Being liked often requires compromise. You soften truth, delay decisions, or stay silent to maintain approval. At first, these compromises seem harmless, but repeated often enough, they create distance between who you are and how you act. This distance produces discomfort. Many try to resolve it by seeking more approval, but approval only masks the conflict. Principles resolve it by removing the contradiction. Living by principles means accepting discomfort in the short term to preserve integrity in the long term. You may disappoint others. You may be misunderstood. You may face resistance. These are not signs of failure. They are signs that you are no longer shaping yourself around external expectations. Strength is not measured by how many people agree with you, but by how consistently you act according to what you know is right. Principles also create reliability. When your behavior is predictable because it is guided by standards, trust develops naturally. Others may not always like your decisions, but they will know where you stand. This clarity is rare, and it commands respect without demand. There is also freedom in principle-based living. Decisions become simpler. Instead of asking how something will be received, you ask whether it aligns with your values. This removes mental bargaining. The mind becomes quieter because it no longer needs to calculate approval. This way of living does not isolate you, it filters your connections. Those who value authenticity remain. Those who require compliance drift away. This is not loss, it is alignment. Relationships formed around principles are steadier because they are not dependent on constant agreement. It is important to understand that principles must be practiced, not announced. Declaring standards without living them weakens credibility. Quiet consistency strengthens it. Over time, your actions speak more clearly than any explanation. Choosing principles over popularity is a daily decision. Some days, it feels heavy, but each time you choose alignment over approval, you reinforce self-respect and inner stability. You become less influenced by pressure and more guided by purpose. In the end, being liked is temporary. Principles endure. When circumstances change and opinions fade, what remains is how you lived and what you stood for. Stand by your principles and let approval take care of itself.